Hello guys, and welcome to my channel. Due to YouTube copyright infringement, we only use one picture with voiceover. Thank you for understanding. If you love history and biographies, please leave a like and a sub. Let's start the video. Cesar Chavez, 1927 to 1993, was an American labor leader and civil rights activist for Latino Americans. With Dolores Huerta, he co-founded the United Farm Workers, UFW, which sought to represent farm workers, especially Latinos, into a major national organization. Chavez was a formidable labor leader who helped to organize low-paid agricultural workers, leading major strikes to force farm owners to improve pay and conditions for workers. During the 1968 Delano grape strike, he also led a national campaign for consumers to boycott grapes until farm workers were better paid. Although the UFW never achieved widespread unionization on a national scale, his activism played a major role in improving conditions for farm workers. His political activism was inspired by the non-violent movements of Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. He also embarked on spiritual fasting to raise awareness and promote his cause. Chavez was born in Yuma, Arizona on the 31st of March, 1927. His grandfather was a Mexican who crossed into Texas at the end of the previous century. His family were a typical Latino extended family who practiced the Catholic religion. In 1939, his grandmother Dorothea died, and after falling behind with mortgage payments, the family were heavily debt. Despite his father's best efforts to delay the process, the local government forced the family and homestead to be auctioned off. The perceived injustice of being forced to sell the family left an impression on Chavez, who saw the combined power of lawyers and local government. The family were forced to move to California, where they worked as itinerant food pickers. Chavez said the family were continually on the move, and he attended over 60 different schools as his family moved from one itinerant farm to another. Some schools were segregated by race, others were unsegregated, and he remembers Spanish was forbidden in school. This was a period of great poverty for the family. The Great Depression had depressed wages, and unskilled farm workers struggled to gain a basic subsistence. For the young Chavez, his new poverty was made starker by the contrast between himself and many of his more affluent classmates. He graduated junior high school in 1942 and, like his parents, became a full-time farm worker. After a 2-year stint in the U.S. Navy from 1946 to 48, Chavez returned to work as a farm laborer in California. On returning to California, he also married Helen Fabella. They had 8 children together. In the early 1950s, Chavez became increasingly politically aware. He read widely, including left-leaning writers and spiritual figures with a political outlook. Reading the biography of Mahatma Gandhi was important for creating a belief in the power of non-violent protest. At the time, agricultural work in America often had the highest levels of poverty, and they had little political or economic influence. Previous federal legislation on union representation had excluded farm workers because of the influence of farmers in key swing states. Farm workers, and especially Latino workers, had very limited opportunities for collective bargaining and had to accept whatever pay and conditions were imposed by employers. In 1953, he was employed by supporters of Mexican-American civil rights to promote voter registration amongst Latinos working across California. Chavez worked for an organization called the Community Service Organization, CSO. Chavez also campaigned on behalf of unemployed farm workers who felt they were losing their job to unregistered guest Mexican workers, who were undercutting American permanent residents. By 1958, his relative success led him to be made the president of the CSO. As president, he secured the financial backing of donors who helped to improve their financial situation. He also led forms of activism such as sit-ins and protest marches for better conditions. Chavez himself was not a great public speaker and only 5'6". But his action and inner determination inspired workers. He led an austere life. He avoided meat and dairy products. Chavez never earned more than $5,000 a year, very low by union organizer standards. In 1962, Chavez founded with Dolores Huerta the National Farm Workers Association, NFWA. It later became the United Farm Workers, UFW. Initially, they struggled to make much impact, but in 1965, Filipino-American grape pickers went on strike for better pay and conditions. Chavez wholeheartedly backed the campaign and strike, which became known as La Huelga or the strike. Speaking in 1965, Chavez said, to further the aims of the strike, Chavez launched a nationwide appeal for consumers to boycott table grapes until the employers met their demands. Chavez felt even a partial boycott would put pressure on the employers. Chavez's appeal made him a national figure, and the grape strike became national news. He gained the support of Robert F. Kennedy, who said of Chavez, "He is one of the heroic figures of our time." It also led to the support of the most influential figure in the American labor union movement, Walter Reuther, who came to California and proclaimed he fully backed the strike. Chavez's leadership and perceived success led to a spread in union activism with a growth in trade union membership, and more strikes amongst fruit workers who felt greater confidence that union activism could achieve success. He was asked why he fought so hard for farm workers. Chavez replied, in 1965, farm workers earned an average of less than $1.50 an hour with no fringe benefits or protection from unfair dismissal and exploitative labor practices. Unionization and the threat of strikes led to significant increases in pay, access to medical insurance, pensions, and a mechanism for challenging employer abuses. It wasn't just the economic improvements that were important. It helped Latino Americans to gain a sense of self-esteem and belief that they were equal citizens and could participate in the future of the U.S. It led to many young Latino Americans to expand their horizons from accepting their position in society. Chavez was an influential leader because he was seen to put his body and soul into the movement. In 1968, he began one of his first fasts. His fasting was inspired by Gandhi and also the Catholic tradition of penance. Chavez felt that the fast was both important for giving him inner strength and determination. It was also a political tool to illustrate that he had the will to achieve what he set out to achieve. A fast is first and foremost personal. It is a fast for the purification of my own body, mind, and soul. The fast is also a heartfelt prayer for purification and strengthening for all those who work beside me in the farm worker movement. In 1970, he began a water-only fast of thanksgiving and hope, which lasted 25 days. In 1970, the success of the grape strike encouraged salad pickers to also go on strike. Chavez's UFW union found itself in conflict with another union, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. Chavez felt the UFW had the main right to represent farm workers, and the Teamsters were undercutting their efforts. In August 1970, 6,000 UFW workers went on strike, causing a halt to lettuce picking. It was the largest agricultural strike in U.S. history and caused the price of lettuce to double. Despite court injunctions to prevent Chavez and the UFW picketing, Chavez ignored them. As a result, he was arrested and put in jail. This led to a bitter dispute between the UFW and Teamster Union for the next 4 years. The battle for the right to represent agricultural workers led to attacks physically and legally on the UFW, and it began to lose its influence and confidence. Chavez decided to change approach, and in 1975, the UFW led a march of farm workers from San Francisco to a major grape producer in Modesto. The march was a great success. Starting with just a few hundred workers, by the time it had arrived at its destination, 15,000 people had joined en route. Combined with past memories of the grape strike, the California State Assembly passed a bill on labor law reform, Agricultural Labor Relations Act, ALRA, which allowed for collective bargaining in agriculture. It also had a good standing clause, which enabled union leaders to deny work to any worker who challenged his decisions. This led to a generally peaceful resolution between the UFW and Teamsters. However, in 1976, a further legislative attempt to pass Proposition 14 to guarantee the right of workers to organize and visit farms was defeated in a referendum of California workers. In the late 1970s and 1980s, Chavez wanted the UFW to become more of a political movement with a transformational character. He became more critical of internal dissent, and many initial board members were removed. He became fearful and suspicious of spies in his own organization. In the 1980s, the power and influence of the UFW declined. Only a small percentage of national farm workers were covered by the UFW. In 1988, he tried to lead a strike against the exposure of farm workers to pesticides, but the strike didn't succeed. Discouraged by the failure, he went on a 35-day strike to try and revive the protest, but it didn't make much difference, and he was persuaded by others to give up his fast, which was now causing health issues. In the late 1980s, he also got into real estate development, using non-unionized labor, which some criticized him for. He died aged 66 on the 23rd of April, 1993 from unknown natural causes in 1994. A year after his passing, he was posthumously given the Presidential Medal of Freedom.